She never denied pulling the trigger. She walked into that bedroom in the early hours of the morning. She fired 5 shots, 2 people died, and for the next 36 years, she told anyone who would listen that she had no choice. Betty Broderick died in prison on May 8th, 2026. She was 78 years old, and the debate about whether she was a murderer or a victim died with her, unresolved. My name is Savannah Cole, and this is what they left behind. I want to be honest with you about something before we begin this episode. Most of the cases on this show are about finding justice for victims who never got it, about cold cases and missing persons and DNA that sat unmatched for decades, about people whose names the world forgot. This case is different. 2 people were murdered. Their names were Daniel Broderick and Linda Kolkena Broderick. They were shot to death in their bed on a November morning in 1989 in San Diego, California. They were real people with real lives, and they deserve to be remembered as exactly that. And the woman who killed them, Betty Broderick, spent the rest of her life insisting that what happened that morning was inevitable, that the years of betrayal and legal warfare and public humiliation that preceded it had left her with no other choice. The jury disagreed twice, but the court of public opinion has never fully agreed with the jury. This is a case about marriage and money and power, and what happens when a woman gives everything she has to a life that is then taken from her. It is also a case about 2 people who were killed in their sleep and never had a chance to defend themselves. Both of those things are true at the same time. I am going to tell you both of them. My name is Savannah Cole, and this is what they left behind. Elizabeth Ann Bishaya was born on November 7th, 1947 in New York City. She grew up in Bronxville, New York in a devout Catholic family. She was smart and driven and beautiful, and she had a plan for her life. She met Daniel Thomas Broderick III at the University of Notre Dame. He was charming and ambitious and going places. They fell in love and they got married in 1969. What followed looked from the outside like the perfect American life. Dan pursued medicine and then law. Betty supported him every step of the way, working as a teacher while he was in medical school, raising their children while he built his career, moving the family from New York to Boston to San Diego as his ambitions required. She put her own dreams on hold. She told herself it would be worth it, and for a while it was. Dan Broderick became one of the most successful medical malpractice attorneys in San Diego. He was prominent and respected and wealthy. The family lived in La Jolla, one of the most affluent neighborhoods in California. Betty drove a Mercedes. They had 4 children. They had everything. Betty later said she was the one who put him through school, the one who worked while he studied, the one who moved and sacrificed and waited. She said she built that life alongside him, and then he took it from her. In the early 1980s, Dan Broderick hired a young woman named Linda Kolkena as his receptionist. Linda was 21 years old, more than a decade younger than Betty. She was described as cheerful and pretty, and completely devoted to Dan. Betty said she knew immediately. Dan denied the affair for years. He told Betty she was paranoid. He told their friends she was unstable. He used the language of mental illness to describe a woman who was watching her marriage fall apart in real time and asking him to stop lying to her. In 1985, Dan filed for divorce. What followed was one of the most bitter and protracted divorces in San Diego history. It lasted 4 years. Dan was a lawyer, one of the best in the city. He knew every move to make, and he made all of them. He controlled the finances. He controlled the legal process. He controlled the narrative. Betty had no legal training. She had dedicated her adult life to being his wife and his support system and the mother of his children. She had no independent income. She had no career to fall back on. She had given him everything, and now he was using the legal system, his legal system, to take the children and the money and the house. The court awarded Dan primary custody of their 4 children. Betty received visitation rights and a monthly support payment that Dan frequently withheld or reduced through legal maneuvers. Betty responded in ways that would later be used against her in court. She drove her car into Dan's front door. She left obscene messages on his answering machine. She broke into his house and destroyed his clothes. She screamed profanities at him in front of their children. Were these the actions of a dangerous woman spiraling out of control, or were they the reactions of a woman who was being systematically dismantled by a man who had all the power and all the tools and was using both without mercy? That question was never fully answered. In 1989, Dan Broderick married Linda Kolkena, the woman Betty had been telling everyone about for years. The woman Dan had denied was now his wife. Betty was 41. Linda was 28. They were married in a ceremony Betty was not invited to. Something in Betty Broderick broke that day. In the early hours of November 5th, 1989, Betty Broderick drove to the Marston Hills neighborhood of San Diego, where Dan and Linda lived. She had a key. She had taken it from her daughter months earlier. She let herself in through the front door. She walked through the house. In the dark, she climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. Dan and Linda were asleep. Betty fired 5 shots from a revolver into the bed. Linda Kolkena Broderick died instantly. She was 28 years old. Dan Broderick was struck by multiple shots. Before he died, he called out, "Help me." Those were his last words. He was 44 years old. Before she left the house, Betty pulled the bedroom phone from the wall. She later said she did not want them to suffer. Prosecutors said she did not want them to call for help. Betty fled the scene. She called her daughter Lee and told her what she had done. She said she had gone there to confront them. She said she had planned to kill herself if they wouldn't listen. She said she was startled when Linda woke up and spotted her. She said she had no choice. 2 people were dead. 4 children had lost their father. And a woman who had once had everything was about to lose the last thing she had left, her freedom. Betty Broderick was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Her first trial began in 1990. Her defense attorney argued that years of emotional and psychological abuse had driven Betty to a breaking point, that the systematic destruction of her finances, her custody, her dignity, and her identity had left her unable to think clearly On the morning of November 5th, the prosecution argued that Betty Broderick was a cold-blooded killer who had planned the murders and executed them without remorse. The first jury could not reach a verdict. It was a hung jury. 5 jurors voted for conviction. 7 voted for acquittal or a lesser charge. The case went to trial again in 1991. At her second trial, Betty took the stand. She testified for days. She was by turns compelling and erratic, articulate about the years of abuse she said she suffered, and then seemingly unable to grasp the full weight of what she had done to Dan and Linda. The prosecution pointed to the phone pulled from the wall, the key taken from her daughter, the drive across San Diego in the pre-dawn hours. They said this was not a woman at a breaking point. This was a woman who planned and executed a double murder. The second jury convicted Betty Broderick of 2 counts of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 32 years to life in prison. She showed no remorse in court. She has never shown remorse. Betty Broderick became one of the most controversial figures in American true crime history almost immediately after her conviction. There were many people, who believed the jury got it wrong. Not that Dan and Linda's deaths were acceptable, but that the full context of what Betty had endured had never been properly weighed. She had supported Dan through school. She had raised 4 children. She had given up her own identity and career and independence to build a life that he then walked away from with a younger woman. And when she tried to fight back through the courts, she found herself fighting a man who was one of the best lawyers in California, a man who knew every legal trick and used every one of them against her. Her supporters argued that the legal system failed Betty Broderick long before she ever picked up that gun, that the custody arrangement was unjust, that the financial settlement was punishing, that a man who had the resources and the legal knowledge to weaponize the court system against his own wife had done exactly that. Her critics argued that none of that justifies murder, that Dan and Linda had the right to live their lives, that Linda Kolkena, who was 28 years old, was not responsible for the decisions Dan Broderick made, that Betty Broderick chose to pick up a gun and use it, and that choice belongs to her alone. Both of those arguments have merit. Betty Broderick was denied parole 4 times. At each hearing, she maintained that she was the victim. At each hearing, the board found that she had not demonstrated sufficient insight into the impact of her crimes. Her own children were divided. Some wanted her free, some did not. A television movie, a miniseries, books, documentaries, podcasts. Betty Broderick never left the public consciousness. She became a symbol of what happens to women who give everything and get nothing back, or of what happens when rage is allowed to become murder. Depending on who you asked, the debate was never resolved in a courtroom. It was never resolved in a parole hearing. It was never resolved in the court of public opinion, and then it became impossible to resolve at all. On April 18, 2026, Betty Broderick was transferred from the California Institution for Women in Chino to an outside medical facility due to a need for higher-level care. On May 8, 2026, she died. She was 78 years old. The cause of death was listed as natural causes. She died in custody. She never walked free. She never expressed the remorse that might have opened a door toward release. She died as she had lived for the last 36 years, insisting that what happened on November 5th, 1989, was not murder, but inevitability. Daniel Broderick was 44 years old when he died. He had 4 children who grew up without their father. He had a legal career at his height. He had a new wife and a new life. And whatever future he might have had was ended in the pre-dawn darkness of a November morning. Linda Kolkena Broderick was 28 years old. She had been married for less than a year. Whatever she might have become, whatever life she might have lived, ended in that bedroom before she ever had the chance to find out they deserved to live. And Betty Broderick, whatever she endured in those years of divorce and legal warfare and public humiliation, made a choice on that November morning that cannot be undone. She had a gun. She drove across the city. She used a stolen key. She climbed the stairs. She fired. Some people will always believe she had no choice. Some people will always believe she had every choice and made the wrong one. The truth is probably somewhere in between, and now there is no one left to ask. Daniel Broderick III was a father of 4. He was brilliant and ambitious, and by many accounts deeply flawed. He deserved to live long enough to become whatever he still might have been. Linda Kolkena Broderick was 28 years old. She was somebody's daughter, somebody's friend, a young woman at the beginning of her life. She deserved to live long enough to find out what that life was going to be. And Betty Broderick, Elizabeth Ann Bishaglia, was a woman who worked and sacrificed and gave 30 years of her life to a marriage and a man and a dream. And when that dream was taken from her, she responded in a way that could never be taken back. There are no clean answers in this case. There never were. The jury delivered a verdict. History delivered a debate. And now death has delivered a silence that will last forever. Whatever you believe about Betty Broderick, whatever side of this you land on, I hope you remember all 3 of them. Daniel, Linda, Betty, real people, real lives, real consequences. This is what they left behind. This has been What They Left Behind. I'm Savannah Cole. Some cases don't have heroes. Some cases don't have villains. Some cases just have people, complicated and flawed and capable of both great love and terrible things. This was one of those cases. I'll see you next Sunday.